There are 5 terms that get thrown around constantly at the hardware store, in YouTube tutorials, and by contractors. And if you don't actually know what they mean, it's easy to nod along and miss something important. These aren't obscure jargon, they're words you'll run into on almost every project. Let's break down what they actually mean and why each one matters. The first term is on center, which you'll hear constantly around framing and stud spacing. When someone says studs are spaced 16 inches on center, they mean the measurement is taken from the center of one stud to the center of the next one, not from the edge of one to the edge of the next. This matters enormously in practice, because if you measure from the wrong reference point while trying to locate a second or third stud, you'll be off by the width of the stud itself, which is usually about 1.5 inches, and that's more than enough to completely miss your target when you're trying to drive a screw into solid framing. Once you understand on-center measurement, laying out shelving brackets, cabinets, or anything that needs to hit multiple studs becomes dramatically more accurate on the first try, instead of a frustrating process of trial and error with the stud finder. It's also worth knowing that not every home strictly follows 16-inch spacing. Some older homes use 24-inch on-center spacing instead, which is exactly why confirming actual spacing with a stud finder before you start marking measurements matters more than assuming a standard number based on what's typical in newer construction. The second term is kerf, which refers to the width of material actually removed by a saw blade as it cuts through wood or other material. This sounds like a minor detail until you're doing a project that requires precise measurements across multiple cuts, because every single cut you make removes a small sliver of material equal to your blade's kerf width, and if you don't account for that loss across a series of cuts, your final piece can end up noticeably shorter than you planned. This is especially important for anything like flooring, trim, or cabinetry, where several pieces need to fit together perfectly, since kerf loss compounds across every cut in the project. The third term actually covers a small cluster of related words that all show up together constantly: shimming, plumb, level, and square. Level means perfectly horizontal, plumb means perfectly vertical, and square means two surfaces meet at a true 90-degree angle. Shimming is the process of inserting thin wedges of material, typically wood or plastic, into a gap to correct for a surface that isn't quite level, plumb, or square, which is incredibly common in older homes where settling over the years has thrown things slightly out of alignment. Understanding these 4 terms together explains why almost every cabinet, door, or shelf installation guide tells you to check and adjust before securing anything permanently. Skipping this step is one of the most common reasons DIY installations end up looking slightly off, even when every individual measurement was technically correct. The 4th term is load-bearing wall, and this is genuinely one of the most important pieces of vocabulary on this entire list, because getting it wrong can be dangerous, not just cosmetically disappointing. A load-bearing wall is a wall that's actually supporting the structural weight of the floors or roof above it, as opposed to a simple partition wall that's just dividing space without carrying any structural load. Removing or significantly altering a load-bearing wall without proper support in place can cause serious structural problems, which is exactly why any project involving wall removal absolutely requires confirming load-bearing status first, typically by consulting a structural engineer or an experienced contractor, rather than guessing based on a YouTube video about someone else's house, since every home's framing layout is different. A rough general rule some people use, that walls running perpendicular to floor joists are more likely to be load-bearing than walls running parallel to them can offer a starting hint, but it's genuinely not reliable enough on its own to make a final decision, especially in homes with additions, remodels, or unusual framing choices made at some point in the past. The fifth term is pilot hole, which refers to a small hole drilled before driving a screw, sized specifically to guide the screw in straight and prevent the surrounding material from splitting. This matters most with hardwoods and near the edges of any material, where driving a screw directly without a pilot hole significantly increases the risk of cracking the wood or having the screw wander off at an angle instead of going in straight. Skipping this step is one of the most common reasons DIY furniture and trim projects end up with visible cracks or crooked screws, and it's also one of the easiest fixes on this entire list, since it just requires a slightly smaller drill bit and 30 extra seconds per screw. What ties all 5 of these terms together is that they're not just vocabulary for the sake of vocabulary. Each one represents a specific, common failure point in DIY projects that people run into constantly without necessarily understanding why. Getting stud spacing wrong means your shelf falls down. Ignoring kerf means your measurements come up short. Skipping plumb, level, and square checks means your finished project looks subtly crooked even when every number was right. Misjudging a load-bearing wall means a genuinely dangerous structural mistake. And skipping a pilot hole means a cracked board or a crooked screw on a project you were otherwise doing everything right on. Notice that 4 of these 5 failure points are things you can't easily fix after the fact without redoing work. A split board, a shelf ripped out of drywall, or a wall removed without proper support are all mistakes that cost real time and money to correct, which is exactly why understanding the vocabulary ahead of time is so much cheaper than learning it after something's already gone wrong. Knowing this vocabulary also changes how you communicate with contractors. At the hardware store and when you're following an online tutorial, since a huge number of DIY guides assume you already know these terms and use them without ever defining them. Once you know what they mean, instructions that used to feel confusing or vague suddenly become a lot more precise and actionable. And you'll also be able to spot when a tutorial or contractor is skipping an important step that these terms would normally flag. If this helped clear up some vocabulary that's been confusing you, subscribe for more foundational DIY knowledge like this, and let us know in the comments which of these 5 terms you didn't actually know the meaning of before this video.